Good evening, good afternoon, good morning, ladies and gentlemen, wherever you're joining us from, welcome back to the Light 'em Up Lounge. Welcome to another inspiring and insightful conversation here at the lounge. I would love to welcome everybody joining us here on Zoom, our friends and family, our regulars, and of course, everybody joining us on the YouTube live stream. Thanks for chiming in. As always, if you have any questions, please make yourselves heard in the comments underneath the live stream. I'll happily forward your questions to our guest of honor. And this week, I'm delighted and I'm honored to welcome the editor and publisher of Cigar and Spirits Magazine, Randy Mastronicola. And Randy is a first timer on the Light 'em Up Lounge. It's a premiere, and I'm truly grateful to have him on and for him to take the time and joining us here with our global audience. Randy, we haven't had a chance to enjoy a cigar in person yet. Um,
No.
at least this is sort of the second best thing to that. And again,
Yeah,
welcome to Light 'em Up. Thanks for joining us, and thanks for taking the time.
absolutely. No, I was looking forward to it. Thank you for having me on. It's very gracious of you to extend that offer. And one of these days, yeah, it would be nice to have a cigar in person. We've actually, as you're aware, had you, we've featured you in the magazine a couple of times in different ways. And we've had your handsome, glorious face gracing our pages. So one of these days in person. And thank you all for sitting in with us as well.
That's too kind, Randy. But most importantly, and today we want to talk about your personal journey with cigars and in the world of publishing. Of course, you tapped into various different industries like entertainment, PR and marketing, of course. But initially, you hold a BA in journalism from NYU, and when you look at the world today. You know, I looked into some of the core philosophies of the journalism program at NYU, and being a journalist myself,
Mhm.
some of these romantic principles and some of these idealistic motives in today's day and age seem on the verge of extinction, and it breaks my heart to say so, but
Mhm.
when you think back to your time at NYU, your ideas that you had of the publishing profession in the first place and where we
Sure.
stand today, how do you feel about that?
Thank you. That's a great question. When you go to a prestigious journalism school, and I was very fortunate to do that. It's not from a highfalutin standpoint. I come from a very lower working class background, and I was very fortunate to somehow, some way get into NYU. But yeah, you're right. Back in the day, you were taught, all of these journalistic principles, the ethics, and the flow of information and fact checking and things of that nature. And the breadth of that, was that you had the backdrop of New York City, which is also very complicated, very dangerous at the time, very ugly, very beautiful. So I was navigating, all these different worlds in terms of what I was taking in from college. Excuse me. And then having worked uh, through college as a bartender in a nightclub. So just navigating all those different worlds and being exposed to artists and writers and musicians and understanding the concept of creativity coming from a very ethnic, working class background. So, and which, quite frankly, wasn't always the most ethical thing there because we had in that environment, we had the working man, we had the great family people who were, cultivating something wonderful with their children, helping the children of immigrants assimilate. as I did, the first generation to go to college. But there was also a little bit of a darker side to New York City at that time. So even entering a college like NYU and taking a journalism class, I always knew that there was a balance between ethics and reality. And that kind of informed me even as a younger guy. And certainly entering the entertainment profession, PR marketing, in the journalism realm. Even within that, I don't know if anyone here remembers the days of payola, but payola was this concept where you had to work with very, very uh, tough people who owned radio stations and entertainment market media outlets. And payola was the only way you can get your bands, you know, exposed, on the radio. So that I don't think really exists anymore. But working with people in our company, we owned, not me personally, but the company owned nightclubs. We owned the San Francisco Music Awards, the New York Music Awards, and then we also represented artists. So all of that, that dichotomy all kind of informed the streets, college, and profession. And I'll never forget, I took a follow-up class in marketing or this or that at the New School for Social Research. And the person who was teaching the class, he came in and he held up Omni magazine. And it was the first magazine to feature, to basically sell out a product. And it was like this really cool 3D, phone, a Motorola phone. And it's like, well, if Omni magazine is doing that, okay, so I see we've entered a maybe not so brave new world. And then at the same time, the New York Post and Rupert Murdoch, we don't have to get into. So it's always been for me what to extract from different environments. I hope that makes sense. I kind of rambled a little bit there.
Absolutely. It
I
certainly
hope that
does.
makes sense to people. Just kind of navigating different worlds, and even with us today, balancing the ethics versus the entertainment and the monetary, aspect of what we do too. So I hope that answers your question.
It does in a very beautiful and almost philosophical way. How do you think that your professional career path was sort of predetermined, or you knew exactly where you wanted to go, and then you just, step by step made it all
Yeah.
fall into place, or was it just a serendipitous, string of nice coincidence?
Mhm. Somewhat both, not to straddle here, but I started writing as a very young boy as an outlet. And the book that turned me was The Outsiders, the S.E. Hinton novel that Francis Ford Coppola turned into a film. And that resonated with me so much because I saw that, there were these teens who were going through a very similar experience, but in the middle of the country. And it just made me feel connected. And it was from that moment I really wanted to be a writer. I realized that maybe there was something a little bit different for me. And that's the kind of path that I took, to NYU and working in literary magazines and things of that nature. But that definitely informed me in terms of, yeah, I don't know exactly what it is, but I want to do something in this arena generally. I thought as a young man I would write the great American novel. That has yet to happen. I guess no one's waiting for the next great Randy Matteo Gennaro Mastronicola American great novel. I guess that hasn't happened yet. But cutting that path, cutting through the writing aspect of it in literary magazines, and then taking whatever skills I do possess. And I'm very humble about that. I don't make any claims to be some great writer or anything. I'm okay. But then taking that and applying it in entertainment industry, PR, marketing, and ultimately to magazines. I've always written in a lot of different platforms, and So I wouldn't say it was predestined, but I was very fortunate that I had mentors that cultivated it. And then I started to believe that a kid from a certain environment could look for something a little bit different, a little bit more, perhaps. And ultimately led me to publishing. Yeah.
I would love to look at two different sides of the medallion today with you. One being journalism and the state of the flow of information and news in general, and of course the more cigar focused aspect. But just
Mhm.
because you mentioned Francis Ford Coppola a second ago, I know that not so long ago you sat down with him and you conducted an interview together.
Yes.
And I'm sure this is a very personal thing, and it very much depends on the gentleman or the lady that you meet. Where sometimes people say you should never meet your idols or
Right.
heroes. But
Right.
with Mr. Ford Coppola as an example, how was it for you to sit down with him? And given that some of his writing has had a personal impact and influence on your career path, how did it change
Um,
your perspective on him once you sat down with him and shared a cigar?
sure. Oh gosh. To sit with him and smoke a cigar and drink brandy, I'm sorry, cognac with him. Going back to this, okay, you look at growing up, not just having an Italian American experience, but all of us in terms of what the Godfather movies represented in terms of family, because that was the crux of it. It was about family. Of course, there was all the mob romance stuff and all of that, but just the impact that it made on the understanding of how a man sometimes has to lose so much in order to keep his family together. And then it frays anyway. So not only that movie, but Apocalypse Now, and I believe he won an Oscar for the movie Patton, which is an incredible movie, and then subsequent movies as well. But to sit down in the home in Napa Valley that he bought with his earnings from The Godfather, and to be able to sit in that wonderful environment, you could see his like daughter's tricycle that was still there, and spending 4 or 5 hours with him, and then subsequent time on another occasion in a restaurant in New York City. It's like a master class on everything, not just film, not just writing, but on philosophy, religion, society. It was the most incredible professional experience I ever had. And the having somewhat, obviously some input in terms of who we feature in the magazine. My bucket list was Francis Ford Coppola and Robert De Niro for very personal, selfish reasons. And I've only gotten half there because once I get Bobby D, I will retire. You know, I'm being somewhat facetious, but with Francis Ford Coppola, and it was funny when he came out, he goes, "Call me Francis," and I couldn't do it. I couldn't do it. So we spent all that time together, and like I said, it was a master class on everything, and it made me so proud of being Italian American. We share a little bit of a similar background, and seeing how much you can strive and attain, and it was just really inspirational. Not that I'm there, obviously, but just to see what someone of a certain background um, can cultivate. And his father was a composer, and he had that ingrained in him, and that was pretty cool. That was one of my highlights, and we're pretty. I wouldn't say uber selective of who we feature in the magazine. We do, obviously, we want to stay on brand. Person who smokes cigars, person who's a spirits enthusiast. All these celebrities have brands now, so I've actually even had to, kind of curtail it because I think consumers are very savvy, and they know when a celebrity or whomever is doing it as a money grab, and they know when someone is really living and breathing and it's authentic. that they love their spirit and they love the development of it. And they're totally immersed in the tequila culture or the mezcal culture, for example. Like, is anyone here a Breaking Bad fan? I would imagine, yeah. So we had Bryan Cranston and Aaron Paul on the magazine. In the magazine, we did a photo shoot and a this and a that. And not only were they humble, but they were just so passionate about their mezcal. And that resonates with the audience. So it's kind of my goal, to feature artists whose story maybe resonates. I'll be honest. I mean, there were times when, it's just something cool to have. And it's like, all right, I know the guy's just a brand ambassador or whatever, but, I want to put James Bond, one of the James Bonds on the cover or something like that, and not to disparage anyone, but it's just good for the audience to know that we strive for authenticity and legitimately. Oh, is Andy Garcia a cigar smoker? Is Michael Strahan, whoever people we've had on in the magazine and on tape over the years. We just like it when it's a little bit more authentic. It makes it more fun for me because you're just like what we do in our daily lives, what we share over cigars and spirits and environment. It makes it more real for our staff to like sit down with someone who's truly an appreciator, an appreciator.
On that note, Randy, I don't know
Yeah,
if you've actually had the comparison, but sitting down with somebody who is a well-known and well-respected celebrity,
sure.
um, does the conversation change when you just sit down with them for an interview for a publication versus sitting down with them,
Yeah,
lighting up a cigar together, and
right.
sharing that, as I would imagine, much more intricate and intimate moment
Sure.
together?
Yeah, 100%. I've never been, because I got exposed to the entertainment industry at such a young age. I realized that, celebrities and this and that are just people. And some of them are good people, and some of them are, not so much. And so I never really had that thing where it's like, ooh, it's always been a goal as a journalist, no matter who you're interviewing or spending time with, to connect.
Mhm.
And I will say this, in the 8 years as executive editor into becoming publisher, I've never had a bad experience interviewing someone because they want to utilize the media to help promote their product. But even beyond the conversation, the Q&A, for example, like I interviewed Andy Garcia at a very historic golf club in Burbank in California. And we were kibitzing and this and that, and then we went into the interview. It's a little more structured. And then after that, I said, "Oh, Mr. Garcia, blah, 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 blah. I appreciate your time." And he goes, "Well, where are you going?" I said, I spent 2 hours with you. And he goes, "No, let's just sit back, relax." And we smoked some Cuban cigars. And he went into the clubhouse and he got some drinks for us. And we were there for 2 hours talking about basketball and Marlon Brando. And at one point, we even, he had to he had to go tinkle. I had to go tinkle. He goes, "Oh, let's just go in the bushes over here." So we tinkled together right there in the bushes. So that's the thing, is that they're just regular people and they like what we like. And usually, and I've never been, I've gone into a couple of interviews with some antipathy, and the person totally turned me around. I'd like to say that we interviewed everyone from 50 Cent to Francis Ford Coppola, rock stars. Just recently interviewed Rod Stewart. And it blows me away sometimes, just, their appreciation of the same things we love. They kind of come from it with an artistic appreciation of it because they're creators, they're creatives, and they get into cigars or spirits very much with an artisanal, oh gosh, I love that. I love the fact that there's so much history to a brand like Fuente or Padron and all that. So it's always been fairly easy to connect, just like we here are very easy to connect to typically when we're at an event or at a lounge or some type of a mixer. It's just bam, that is the genesis. That's the starting point. We'd all use our cigars and, for the camaraderie and a jumping off point. It's like, hey, I love talking about this, that, and the other. Let's have a meaningful conversation and smoke a stick. You know, I hope that answers the question. I have a tendency to go a little bit, so just stop me.
It's
Don't
perfect.
feel
No,
don't feel
no
shy
worries,
about that.
no worries at all.
My wife tells me to nip it in the bud all the time, so I'm sure there's some people here who have that experience. She gives me the hook.
We have a very friendly crowd here, and usually, they love people who ramble on and just speak from the
There you
heart.
go. There you
That's
go.
all we could wish for. Let me
So,
briefly rewind a little bit to
sure.
your early days after NYU. Did you have the dream of going to one of the big newspapers to become a career journalist and venture onto, working for some of the big names? Or did you always feel comfortable in a more niche environment? Because
Mhm.
ultimately, as much as we all love the cigar industry, and here we are on a Zoom live podcast, whatever you want to call it,
Yeah,
talking
yeah.
just about and with cigar nerds. Let's face it, it's still a very niche environment that we're in.
Absolutely, yeah.
Of course, the
Absolutely.
spirit side for you, I think, broadens the audience and the horizon tremendously.
That's
But
what's great about us is we do have that duality there.
in the
That
beginning, though, what was your idea, or was there one?
there was, like a lot of journalism students, and also having been involved in, the music scene a little bit. I always wanted to work for like Rolling Stone, back in the day, Cream magazine, um, things of that nature. Having, a music geek, and a lot of my friends were musicians as well. Once I got to school, but it was always kind of a dual thing there because I wrote for literary magazines and short stories and poems and things of that nature. So, a lot of times people think, oh, there's this guy from New York City. What's he doing writing poems? Hey, man, we all have a soft heart and we can share that, with people. So it was kind of a two-pronged thing there. The literary kind of high aspiration, and then like, oh, I'd love to work for um, like a rock and roll magazine, we'll say. And I did some work with the Village Voice in terms of music reviews. I did back in the day before we had social media and people would call like a 1-800 number for record reviews, record recommendations, where to go and see bands and all of that. So I was actually one of the editors for that service. So was able to kind of, get some of that. But what happened was when I was bartending through NYU, the management made me a deal. And they said, okay, look, kid, if you complete a degree, we're going to get you out of the bar and we're going to give you a job at essentially what corporate was in a marketing thing. So that's how I was able to connect and have it all kind of fuse, kind of the creativity, the desire to work in some capacity, a journalistic capacity in the music field. And it kind of came together that way because, you're out every night and you're reviewing bands and you're looking to sign bands. You're utilizing your writing skills for, press releases, et cetera, et cetera. So it just kind of ended up the way it was meant to be. And I still would love to write the great American novel. I would still love to publish a piece in Rolling Stone. Maybe it happens, maybe it doesn't. You know.
Part of the reason why I asked you that is, do you think there's a fundamental difference in working a traditional journalistic career path? Let's say you work for the Post or for the Times, as opposed to working independently as
Right.
somebody who's involved with cigar media, because one, people would usually and normally associate with traditional media
Sure.
that and journalism that follows certain ethical standards, whereas in the cigar world, for example, it feels like there's a lot of hobbyists,
Hmm.
but I sometimes worry that we lack certain professionalism when it comes to the media side in our industry.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's a wonderful point. Try to finesse what I want to say here. But there's always a balance between, for a publication like ours. I mean, obviously, we're not the Wall Street Journal. We're not the Washington Post. It's supposed to be fun. That's why you guys read our magazine, hopefully, or follow us, on social, because we're fun. We want to make it entertaining. And it's just a different type of take on it all. Whereas of course we do our fact checking and we don't want to get a lawsuit or something like that, but we're not so heavy intense about that. But in terms of having, the ethical principles apply, there's a lot out there, and it usually comes with the cigar reviews and the cigar ratings and kind of the old boys school of who's getting featured in a magazine and who's kind of a pay to play thing. And it's like, there's always going to be that, in any profession. And we do try to stay away from that. I actually used to write for Cigar Journal, and I was on their panel, their tasting panel, and where you're doing the blind tastings and all of that. And the standard that they hold, their ratings to is it's par none. It's par none. And so we try to do that as well. People submit, it's advertisers, it's non-advertisers. It gets paneled out. I don't even see it. It just kind of comes back to me in terms of data, and all of that. So we try to keep the system pure. There are many, many influencers out there who, and you see it out there, man. It's just like somebody sent me a bottle of scotch, so I'm going to go ahead and promote that scotch, and it's like, well, it might not be the scotch that, you or I, hold or revere, but they're doing it because they received the bottle. They're looking for a little, play with the company and all of that. So you have that balance against commerce, essentially. That's kind of what it is. And we try to do as good a job as we can, you know.
One
But
thing that's also very interesting is that um, for me, and that's really from the outside looking in. So please
sure,
correct me if you think that I'm off in my perception. Um,
sure.
Cigar and Spirits Magazine does not exclusively play in the typical cigar industry inside baseball. Obviously, the big feature being interviews with celebrities, and not just cigar industry celebrities, in other words, the manufacturers, the master blenders. So you're probably looking at the whole ecosystem through a more consumer oriented lens. And I find that refreshing, as much as I'm a geek myself, and we
Yeah,
often
sure.
discuss on the show that you want to take a deep dive into the blends and the intricacies of the soil and the microclimate and the type of fermentation, how long you take it and everything. But then again, we sometimes have to sort of rewire our brain a little bit and be like, okay, where do 99% of the actual cigar enthusiasts and consumers sit in terms
Right.
of their knowledge or their interest, right? And how do you cater to that?
Yeah, well, I take all the credit and I take all the blame because 8 years ago, when I came on, one of the things that I wanted to do with the company is I said, I think being, of course, we're cigar centric, we're spirit centric, and you're going to always have coverage around that. But I said, we're not going to survive if that's the only type of coverage that we offer. Because There are many, many media outlets out there that do it incredibly well. So the goal was to bring in more of the lifestyle perspective, and not even in a funny, highfalutin, rich guy, rich gal way. Just there are things as appreciators of cigars, of spirits, the finer premium types of product, you just kind of gravitate to. I like a good watch. I like a nice pair of sunglasses, that kind of thing. So it doesn't have to be, oh, I have a yacht, and be that kind of goofy about it. But that was my goal. I wanted to take what we had, which was how many profiles are we going to do on a distillery? How many times are we going to interview or feature a brand ambassador who advertises, that kind of a thing. So my goal, and I think we've done a good job cultivating writers and contributors and photographers, groomers, stylists, etc. It takes a village, and really expanding on what we offer. The lifestyle coverage, the wonderful travel sections that we put together that our writers just do a wonderful job on. Some fashion products, watches, and things of that nature. But of course, we have central to that. We do a profile each issue on a brand person. For example, it could be Carlito. It could be we just had Artisano coming out now. Next, we've had Justo from JRE. I mean, just constantly they're in our magazines, just so you guys, the audience, gets to see these cigars just don't find their way from crop to shop. There's people behind it, and that's why we call that section behind the leaf. And then we also do an iconic brand spotlight, whether it be a Johnny Walker or a Hennessy. And then, of course, we rate cigars. We review. We don't rate spirits anymore because we have a spirits competition. We've decided to stay away from hanging a number on the spirits and then taking all of what is reviewed and then utilize that in our World Spirits competition, which is coming up. But I'm digressing. The goal was to take make a hybrid of a coffee table magazine and combine it with some of the content that you see in Esquire, GQ, Aficionado. I love those guys. I have no problem saying they're wonderful, and then just kind of make our own thing. And I think we do that. And I think that's why the stories that we tell in our magazine and on social, I think they really do resonate, because it's more than just, how many times you're going to go and see a photo of a guy holding a leaf, a guy in a tobacco barn. I just find it after a while, and I love my cigars as much as anyone who's sitting in on the call. But I just find it like, there's a little bit more out there. Let me talk about, watches and ties and this and that and travel and sports, a little bit of sports. We don't do too much of it other than golf, maybe. So that was the goal 8 years ago. And I will say this, we're always evolving. Particularly, there are many miles to go in terms of our media outreach on social. We started a podcast. I'm sure everyone here on the call has a podcast, right? Because everyone, my dog Mookie, I'm going to start a podcast for him. I mean, everyone has a podcast, right? So, but we have one star podcast. So there's things that we can do as well to make sure we keep connecting to the appreciators out there.
What I find interesting is that sometimes the whole lifestyle aspect, and even the word I would say is debatable,
Yeah,
but that whole connotation sometimes sits a bit weirdly with cigar
sure.
enthusiasts, right? Because it feels like, well, you're watering down the substance, and I think CA sometimes has to take that blame. That it's not a cigar magazine anymore, it's a lifestyle magazine.
Yes,
Well,
yes, yes.
good for them, right? And one thing we
Sure.
should not overlook is the cross-pollination from other industries like fashion, watches, travel, hospitality, where
Sure. Yeah.
people can then somehow discover the cigar ecosystem and probably
Mhm.
get sucked into it, which is a
Right.
very important way of introducing new people to the culture and lifestyle of cigars. And just a couple of days ago, I had a conversation with a good friend of mine, and he said to me, "Well, didn't you realize that recently on all the Netflix shows and new movies coming out, suddenly there's people smoking cigars again, and supposedly every movie." And I was like, I did not notice because I thought it was the other way around because of regulatory issues
Mhm.
and compliance and corporate policies and stuff. And I'm curious, I'm sure you've experienced that with a lot of spirits brand as well. Some of them want nothing to do with tobacco. It's like the
Certainly.
Antichrist, and let's not go there because for them it's a challenge in terms of corporate policies.
Yes.
But it, do you feel that as well, that suddenly cigars are becoming more popular again and there's people coming from all these other lifestyle
Mhm.
audiences and industries and suddenly they discover a premium cigar in a completely different environment, but it sticks with them?
Sure. Yeah, I do. I know years and years and years ago with the first cigar boom, and Cigar Aficionado did a wonderful job, educating all of us, about what was out there. And that was like the first explosion of it in terms of like pop culture. Men of our various generations here, we probably go from boomers to millennials, if I can pin you guys in terms of your age range. But yeah, that was like the first boom. And then, like anything else, there's a ebb and flow. And then what happened during the pandemic, obviously people were, home so much more. And we really tried to support brick and mortar as well. And I think between that and the online and this and that, I think it actually triggered another cigar boom.
Mhm.
And because now we could, we were working from our homes and we can go on the patio or a rooftop or whatever and smoke a cigar, while we're on our laptops. And I know that sales, everything went kaboom, particularly spirits as well. But you bring up an interesting point about somewhat the tobacco aspect of it being excluded, to the spirits realm a lot because it's almost like, well, I don't want to get that stink on me. And sometimes the cigar people feel that about alcohol and vice versa. We've even had that with,
Interesting.
people who have, we have solicited and say, hey man, you want to be on our cover. Um, it's like, well, so and so has gone through an alcohol rehab. He loves cigars, but he's not going into a magazine that, or also even just, female celebrities too. It's like, oh, well, she loves her skinny vodka, but, she doesn't want to be associated with tobacco, you know. So I think there's a little bit of antipathy, I mean, probably most people like us can appreciate, both. And, again, we generally don't go to this area that much, but, the impact, like CRA, we try to help them as much as that's the Cigar Rights of America, in case anyone doesn't know. And we try to like make sure that people are educated about the tobacco and the products and the elevated experience that we have. And it's not just some, gutter rat, horrible, um, type of other smoke that's out there, we'll just say. So it's an education thing, and we do a little bit of that in our magazine. It's not something that we particularly delve into all that much, but enough behind the scenes so that we feel we're helping. Because everyone here, wants to keep smoking, right? We want to keep smoking our cigars, and of course, in a manageable way, you know. So yeah, I think there's in any business, there's going to be some challenges, So we have our challenges, but we feel we navigate both lanes well. We do.
How much attention do you pay to the inside baseball discussions that you see amongst cigar industry folks or hardcore cigar geeks, whether it's on social media or when you walk the trade show floor.
Yeah.
Um, is that something that you even listen to, or you rather try to
Mhm.
leave it out there in order
Oh,
not to be distracted, where you want to focus on a very particular view on the cigar and spirits industry to present to your audience?
I think it's changed over the years. Years and years ago, when I was a bit younger, I'd love going to a lounge and talking to guys, women, about cigars. And a lot of times the shop owners, the lounge owners, they were so wonderful with recommendations and educating, their customers, their regulars. So I think maybe at that point I kind of needed that, and I pretty much don't do that now. I mean, it's also information overload. In any given week, I will receive, our staff will receive 20 to 50, depending on the time of the year when cigars are being released. We will receive an inordinate amount of press releases about this cigar is being released, that cigar is being released. And quite frankly, we don't publish those because we don't want advertisers or non-advertisers to think that they're getting play. And also, there's only so much information you can take in. And I think with a lot of us, we have the brands and the cigars that we like and we gravitate. But like, I'll have a conversation with you and you say, hey, Randy, try this new Drew, that kind of a thing. And you share. That's the most fun thing about what I do. And I'm sure what many of our, people who are here on the call, just sharing this stuff is just, whether it be a little bit of knowledge, whether it be a cigar that we love, I just find that really impactful. When you can turn, somebody on to a new cigar and they're enjoying it, and then you're sharing about, oh, not so much the notes, but maybe a little bit of this and of that, and how to appreciate the cigar. And yeah, so I think that
On that
it's kind of
note,
changed over the years.
sorry if I interrupted you
No,
there,
no,
but just on that note, um, it's wonderful to hear that and very interesting. I'm just wondering, like, do you think that if you were to put yourself in the shoes of a brand owner or a manufacturer, should they change the conversation or look at presenting their information to somebody like yourself sitting on the publishing end in a completely different way, whereas the entire industry seems to be stuck in a repetitive notion of releasing press release after press release, like here's the new cigar, wrapper binder filler, a fluffy two-liner of what's behind it marketing wise, and
yeah,
off you go.
yeah. Yes, I think that there's some information overload there. And I think that there, and I could be cutting off my nose to spite my face here, but well, we'll just present it this way. A lot of the boutique brands are doing equal to job or a better job than a lot of or many of the brands that we all know and love and will go and continue to buy their cigars, I hope. But a lot of those younger brands, they deserve our attention. They don't have the resources, obviously, to promote, in that manner. And I think what we have to do is look at, of course, we love knowing, figuring out maybe what the tasting notes are, or where that wrapper binder filler. It's wonderful to know that. But I think we have to look at it as experience. It's experiential. And what are we experiencing? Are we working? Are we learning about a new brand? Or are we just looking at a new Vitola that so and so put out, just like they did, or they reinvigorated a blend, put a new band on it, that kind of thing. And I think if we just kind of keep our ears and eyes open, not so much to the, oh, they're releasing this, oh, they're releasing that, but just go and explore, a little bit at your retail shop, or obviously your information online, those types of things. And we've always been really, really sensitive to helping younger brands get started. Just wonderful younger brands that make incredible cigars. And of course, we're very connected and attached to the very traditional brands that have, hundreds of years of tobacco in their DNA. But I think that's what's great about the industry is that there's a breadth of product. There's a lot of information out there. And I think a lot of the information, I don't know if people on the call have experienced this, but okay, for example, like tasting notes, and I'll just be very transparent. One of my writer who does our featured pairings, he's wonderful. He's a certified tobacconist, blah, 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 retro hails. I mean, he's just, his capacity to understand and share what his experiences is far beyond mine. But in one of the tasting notes, he said something to the effect, this, that, or the other reminds me of my wife's tunnel of fudge bundt cake. And I said, all right, that's enough of that. We're not doing it. I don't know what you're talking about, quite frankly. But we have to look at that and strip it down. Did it have a little bit maybe more of a chocolatey, type of experience for you? So we can get a little too immersed in this. And, I think sometimes, what do we look for? We look for a cigar that feels great in the hand, has great construction, has a wonderful draw. It's flavorful, it's creamy. Depending on our palates, is it this, that, or the other, like a bold cigar, or whatever, And I think sometimes it's better to just kind of strip it down that way and not get so focused on, am I getting it? Am I getting it? Oh, I read this review and it says, citrus and molasses. And just let that go. I've had this conversation with people, brand owners, many, many times, and they go, how do we present? I'd like your opinion. They'll ask for my opinion. How do we present this? You have such wonderful, descriptions in your magazine. How do we differentiate ourselves? And I say, just tell the story of the cigar, the experience, how it makes you feel, how it feels in your hand. Is it a handsome cigar? Does it hold an ash? That kind of a thing. Did you share it with someone and they liked it? And whatever you're picking up, in terms of the notes, so be it. For me, that's secondary. I know when I got a good cigar. I don't have to sit there and analyze it, break it down and go, I have someone in my family who does this and it just drives me crazy. But everybody's different, so.
And
Do
with
you know what I
quality,
mean? Does that
oh, very
resonate
much so.
with people?
Absolutely. Because, I sometimes feel that we get carried away a little too much, or we especially in times of social media, when the algorithms are just pushing us deeper and deeper into our own bubbles and predetermined ecosystems. But I also think of it as a bit of a chicken and an egg problem, right? Because again, when we talk about cigar media, there's a lot of similar platforms, and most of what they do is publish press release after press release after press release and regurgitating these news bits and pieces with the odd review thrown in there for good measure every now and then, but that's about it, right? And then in those ecosystems we get very nerdy, and we can have those hour-long debates and discussions as to whether we should disclose the blend information, and if so, to which extent and depth. And sometimes then you zoom out a little bit and you think, is that really relevant for the everyday cigar smoker that probably makes for the bulk or 90% of
Sure, that's a good point.
the cigar consumption out there?
Yeah, there are people who just have totally immersed themselves in the culture of it, are kind of casual about it. I know when we have our tasting events, people come out, they want the entertainment, they want the spirits, they want to dance, they want to mix and mingle. And of course they love cigars. They're there, but they're not so hardcore about it. And you look at even, where cigars are sold, oftentimes they're just sold in the middle of the country, at least in the United States, it's sold in the middle of the country, and they don't have access to, going to this event or that event or whatever. And it's just more of an organic type of experience. And I think, there are times when I'll go, not in advance of smoking a cigar, but as I've kind of gotten through it a little bit, I'll go, let me go check a review. Fine. I just don't like to know going in because then it kind of influences. And then it becomes when you are reading, reviews, it can be a little bit too much. Of course, we encourage you to, we like to think of ourselves as influencers. And when you're reading, our magazine, if we are cigar gets a good score, yeah, well, I want you to do that. But you know what? The cigar that the panel is smoking or whatever that gets an 88, it might be your 95. We all know that, So, but yeah, I think we can get a little carried away with that. And I think there is almost a little bit too much information. And you do see on social media, everyone's an expert nowadays. I mean, I am a writer. Many of my friends are writers. And years ago when, everything just hit, oh, this guy has a blog? Really? And why? What his qualifications? Not even in the cigar realm. I mean, just, and then of course now we all, deal with, or not deal with, we see so many, quote unquote influencers out there. And, you can kind of read between the lines, like I kind of alluded to before, a lot of times it's just kind of money, somebody's sending them product and they have 2 million followers and, they're going to promote, and that's fine. That's fine. But I just don't like being duped. I like discovering things for myself and talking to people and reading and going and taking it from that point forward. I didn't know what a good cigar was growing up. We in where I grew up, it was almost bifurcated. You had the working men who smoked what we called the guinea stinkers. I'm of Italian descent, so I can say it. They had the guinea stinkers, the short, little box press. We all know Clint Eastwood had the longer version of it, and good, bad, the other. And that was like the working man cigar. And then we also had the other flip side of it, the guys in the neighborhood who back in the day were, with the black cars with the shark skin suits and yada, yada, yada. And they were smoking the Cubans, I believe. I don't know, but I'm assuming back in the day. And I'm looking at that and I'm going, what is a good cigar here? The working man cigar or that Cuban? And I didn't really know, until I got a little older and I was able to experience it. And it also is kind of a metaphor for what type of person I suppose I wanted to be. And I'd like to think that I kind of merged the two a little bit. But, I will smoke a working man cigar any day of the week. Any day of the week. I want to sit down with this guy, and I don't care if it's a $4 cigar. I don't care if it's a $60 cigar. I've had $60 cigars that people have given me. I generally don't buy a $60. And it's been shit, quite frankly, and then I'll smoke, an $8 cigar. I smoke bundle cigars that are, just fine, But I think it comes down to attitude, and drawing in, no pun intended, but drawing in a lot of information, drawing in our influences. But then we're here to enjoy each other and enjoy the moment.
Yeah. Taking all of what you said, which I absolutely love and agree with, taking that into consideration, how do you think that brands in today's environment can manage to stand out from the rest, especially given the information overloads you mentioned?
Sure.
And if I may, just to sort of a follow up on that, I think the very same applies to the media landscape as well, particularly then as a distinguished media outlet. How do you stand out as well?
Well, thank you for saying that. But I think it's about telling a story. I think people, like when we do our featured pairings, I always encourage my writer to, of course, you want to talk about the notes of the cigar and how it, meshes well with the spirit. But talk about the experience. I had a really tough day, and all I wanted to do was come home and pet my dog and But this happened and that happened. Right? And then finally, at 10 p.m., I was able to go in the backyard and decompress and have my scotch and my cigar. And it helped me clear my, whatever your story is, like for me, it was probably about 5 years ago, or maybe it was pre-pandemic, whatever. I went back to the neighborhood that I grew up in by myself, sat down on the stoop, and just fired up a cigar and just remembered everything. Just sat there, soaking it in. The days when there were 100 kids on the block playing stickball and this and that, and the fire hydrants were open, and that's what we were swimming in. And of course, that world no longer exists, but just creating a moment for myself. And now, actually being able to tell you guys that story, and yeah, and that to me is very moving, to share that with you, and that's why I think we relish, enjoying cigars. So to correlate that to your original part of your question, I think what the brands need to do is, of course, educate us. I think they need to pull back a little bit on telling us what to expect, force feeding us, and then just letting us make our own judgments on it. And I think what's been wonderful about social media is that the brands do get a lot more feedback than they used to. Excuse me. How they process that, I don't know if a lot of again, to champion the newer brands, a lot of the newer brands are great at compiling the information that they get, out there and soliciting people's opinions at tasting events, going to the lounges, doing the boots on the ground stuff. Whereas I think some of the traditional brands, and God love them, I'll probably smoke one of theirs later. I think it's almost like a taken for granted that we have this divine right and we will sell no matter what. But a lot of these younger brands are nipping at the heels. And if I can pass something along, I would say, go and explore those other brands because they have new stories that they're telling and new reasons why they're getting into this. And their stories oftentimes, how many of us here might have had the thought that, oh man, I'd love to open up a cigar lounge. Oh, what would that experience be for me to blend my own cigar? I mean, I think that, when I've been to the Dominican Republic and I'm there with Manuel and Noah, and Manuel is the master blender for La Aurora cigars, in case anyone doesn't know. And, I'm watching him and he's talking about the science of it, the art of it, and all of that. I'm going, oh, wouldn't it be incredible to blend a cigar? Like, it was so like out of my realm of understanding, 20 years ago. I just smoked them, But now that I have been educated, that there's that. So to have that little bit of fantasy, having a balance between the information and the experience, I think that's about it. Conversely, if you're a cigar geek, wonderful. I would just, as a journalist, I would encourage you to go and seek out reputable sources and not someone that's just a marketing machine that's putting stuff out there to you. That would just kind of be my only tip, in that regard.
Um, One question that we sometimes discuss here on the show is
Yeah.
why isn't there more in-depth, well-researched, long format content in the cigar world about whether that's, really detailed information about the soil and the pH
Mhm.
and the microclimate, the real hardcore geeky stuff,
Sure.
or even a deep dive into some historical references and connotations. Um, and as I mentioned before, I think that, a lot of cigar media platforms nowadays look virtually the same because you have the same press release features and a
Mhm.
few reviews in there.
Sure.
Is it a supply or a demand issue in your opinion?
Yeah, I think the education is out there if you want it, and if one of the perks of my job, and I'm so grateful for it. I feel blessed. Is that someone will invite us down, to Honduras or the Dominican Republic, and we will see the whole seed to shelf process, the whole, what is it, crop to shop, I think, that kind of thing. And so I'm fortunate that I can do that. So if anyone ever can do a tobacco tour at a factory, if anyone can ever do, I think Rocky Patel like used to do like tobacco cruises and things like that. Um, if you ever can, I would suggest go do that because the education and the experience that you'll have is will stay with you for a lifetime. That trip we did to the Dominican Republic and spent time with the La Aurora people, and not just I'm talking about in the fields and the this and the that. I'm talking about their particular factory, and the brand has a museum, and they put so much back into the culture for DR, and they're so philanthropic, and just learning about the culture, the backstory of that cigar, that kind of a thing. And I think for me, that's what's more interesting. Not that um, you shouldn't, if you're really interested in the science of it, that kind of a thing. You could go back to, I was talking to a cigar brand owner he's just a character, this guy. And he was talking about, the whole Native American connection, the spirituality to tobacco, and the health benefits and the acidity and how it this and that and the other thing. And I said, well, all right, that's your take on it, and that's actually kind of interesting. But we're here to encourage people to smoke cigars, but to do it, responsibly, like it says on the label, that I don't think you want to put it out there that there's health benefits. So again, the misinformation that can sometimes go out there as well. But absolutely, that's is one of the incredible things about the Fuentes and the Padrones and those types of brands is that there is the history there. There are books written about them, educate you about how it went from this guy to that guy to this son to this daughter nowadays. And then, of course, all the information that's out there in terms of, cropping and the science part of it and everything. And I do want to make a point. I just said that how brands will go from grandfather to father to son, but also even daughter. I just had a wonderful conversation with, does anyone know JRE Cigars, Aladino Cigars? Just incredible, an incredible brand. And I did an interview with the owner, Cousteau's daughters, and they're very, very involved, in the company now. And so I do want to make a point that women listen to them, not just about cigars, but other things too. And I love seeing having women in the lounge with us and getting their perspective. And you're starting to see a little bit more of that feminine energy, which I think is really encouraging for the cigar industry, and not so much in the the hotsy totsy cigar influencer on Instagram, whatever. With I like looking at women too, but just in terms of people who have legit knowledge and it has come through their DNA as well, and they live and breathe it, like we do too. So I like that aspect of it too because it's
Part
great
of
to
my question
expose.
was
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
also, Randy, that why do you think that we don't see more, like, for example, long format written content or
Right.
thorough, in-depth video footage? I
Mhm.
know, of course, in today's platform economy that
Sure.
we live in, where it's all about a reel that's like 25 seconds or
Yes.
TikTok. I don't think that's the end of how actual enthusiasts or connoisseurs would like to be informed or consume content. Yet we don't see much of it, and that's what I also meant with supply
Gotcha.
and demand. Do you think the audience is just not willing to read through all of that, or do we not have the platforms to procure and to put forth such valuable content?
I think the platforms were there. And what has happened even in our little kingdom that we have as publishers people have had to change. And you hit it on the head because of social media, TikTok. Everything is sound bites and oh gosh, can I get my SEO and this and that? Boom, in 10 seconds, somebody does a search on me. And that's obviously been wonderful in many, many ways, but I think it has dumbed us all down a little bit. And even for us, we have had to evolve in that manner. For example, when we do a feature article, it's Rod Stewart and he's talking about his whiskey, or whether it's Carlito Fuente talking about whatever, or Liana, his daughter, I have to limit the word count on the article now. I mean, like really cut it down because the attention spans out there are much they're less, quite frankly. And I think the bloggers, and God bless them, that we all have a place. There's room for us all, But even as culturally, I know I'm not reading Dostoevsky. I'm not reading Canterbury Tales and the Friendlies anymore. I'm not doing that. So maybe I'm also to blame because I'm kind of kowtowing to it. But I think that's really the reason why people aren't generally writing books about that. And I think they're the podcasts, and that's one of the reasons why we're trying to expand on that. We're getting our sea legs, so I'm not even going to promote it much, but I think that's what podcasts are great for, and I think that's a great platform nowadays. And a lot of our cigar brethren in the media do a great job with that. They really do. And I think if you want to get kind of longer format stuff, that's the place to go. Because you're not going to get it in Journal. You're not going to get it in Aficionado, this one, that one, Us. It's just not going to happen nowadays because of the way publishing has changed. You're just going to have to seek it out differently.
An excellent point. Now, since you have your feet both in the cigar and the spirits world, what do you think they could learn from each other? And I think probably focus more on the cigar side and what we could learn from the spirits industry, given that it's probably more mature, has a larger audience, and a couple years head start in terms of
Certainly.
the PR and marketing side, at least.
Yeah, we think, one of the things that we're proud of is that we have that balance in our magazine. We are so, proud of the brands that we work with, as ad partners, obviously. You want to work with quality people, but even just, by and large, just brands that we've reviewed, have no connection to them. We're not doing anything for them. They're not doing anything for us. And that information is legit. It is there for you guys to take that. And it is a little easier with spirits to get the notes a little more accurately and all of that. I find that. And I think many people that I've spoken to find that as well. So I always love when, I'm reading one of our writers and their tasting notes, and then I'll find a cigar in the same issue or the content that they've kicked back to me as an editor. It's like, oh, okay, great. Oh, those notes on that spirit review, because I got to read everything. Really mesh with that, and I'll say, okay, to the staff, let's just sit down, smoke that and drink that and all of that. But yeah, I think we navigate two worlds. I think we do it really well. What I think each industry can learn from each other is to tell the story more, and be authentic about it. Just don't shove this scotch down my throat. I want to know, oh my gosh, look, it's locally sourced, a bourbon or whatever. Oh, it's organic. See, that's the little bit of the geek in me. I like a little bit of the backstory, but I don't need to know about all the processes. Once I kind of get the little tidbit that I find that interesting, then I'll go sample it. That's what I think they can actually learn from each other, is tell more of a story, versus kind of, the hard sell, marketing of it, and quite frankly, I mentioned earlier, like payola, pay to play. Um, when you go into a lounge, if someone's trying to hard sell you a cigar too much, maybe don't buy that cigar. You
I would also imagine that from the various interviews and conversations that you have with people all across the board, whether it's your everyday Joe sitting at a cigar lounge or
know.
the Hollywood celebrity, the reflection that you get as to what they're interested in a certain scotch or other liquor or a cigar is maybe fundamentally different from what the industry believes needs to be put forth as information piece.
Yeah, I think when you when you smoke, typically, if you're doing a photo shoot with a celebrity, the company we are providing them with what to smoke and what to drink, and more often than not advertisers. It's just what we like. You know, so you're having that experience. It's like, oh, this works really well together. You're sitting there with whomever, you know. But in terms of the average Joe, I still now and again love going to a lounge, um, see what they're smoking, do a little, oh, okay, there's that. I want to see if they're spending more time with another cigar magazine versus ours. I like to sit back and see where they're flipping to and where they're staying. There's all those things. It's again, these industries, um, they're not bifurcated. They're hand in hand, in many, many ways. And I think there's enough information out there. I don't know how many people on the call are, really delve into the backstories, of the cigars. I'd love to know because hit me up, on Instagram. Please follow, not my personal because who cares, but please follow us, at Cigar and Spirits.
I'm curious, maybe Albert has a word to say or chime in here. Mace just raised his hand, so we'll hear
Yeah,
from
sure.
first. But always good to have some feedback from our esteemed guests here. Mace Fire.
Reinhard, so much. Great being here. Great seeing you guys. Randy, great seeing you. Great having you, listening to you. It's been an amazing hour and a half. I can't believe it's already been an hour and a half. It's been really cool. Chilled. I, I guess I've got my perspective on this is
Smooth criminal.
I think there's a culture clash. And I mean that in terms of, especially from a UK perspective, and
Mm,
probably all the other guys that I know who are on this chat, who are on this live stream is in Europe, and I say the UK especially, you got a lot of geeks, a lot of nerds. We want everything. We want to know, because I think one of the things to appreciate when I see it is in the US, the selection is huge.
mm,
It
mm,
it's probably too much, right? You come to the UK, we're paying an arm and a leg for a cigar because of the taxes. It's crazy. So when people and the lounge experience is different. We don't have sports TV in the background. When you go to a lounge in the UK, you're really there for that. You're there for that experience. You're there for that chat
mm.
with you. So the whole vibe is such that when you're investing, where you would pay $10 for that cigar and I'm paying 30, I'm invested. Right? At the point of purchase, I'm invested. I want to know. I want to find out as much as I can. So I think the culture over here, we're very much about digging into it because we don't have that breadth of a selection. So the little that
Right.
is here, and I say little, it's not little, but the little that is out here, everybody wants to know about it. They want to know that family history. When we've got guys flying out here from the US or from, South America to sort of present their wares, people are turning up. They're really asking deep questions. They want to know, they want to sort of, buy into that family, buy into that manufacturer. So I think the cultures are probably different because over
Right.
here, there is definitely an ADD thing. There is definitely an attention deficit disorder thing going on in the world. But I think
Hmm.
when it comes to cigars, the people that I know, I went to an event last night for Chateau Diadème here in London. Uh,
Hmm.
the questions that were being asked, like, for 45 minutes, like they were just firing questions at Thierry, just like really deep about, would he ever consider actually growing his own, buying a farm? Like people were really invested and they really want to know. So I think for me personally, the cultures are probably different where you have such a selection. It's it can be a bit over the top maybe in the US and people aren't really just smoking for the sake of smoking, whereas over here it's so expensive, there's so limited time, we don't have as many venues to do it in. People get invested and they really love it and they really want to know more about it. So I guess I wanted to ask you as well is, have you seen that culture difference in different countries? Maybe have you sort of, I'm sure you've been around the world. Have you seen that difference in how people engage with it when you come out to Europe versus maybe the US?
Sure. Yeah, well, thank you for sharing, that experience. To speak to that, okay, so in terms of what we do, we have our print magazine, this is our brand. What we share on social media is another aspect of what we do, part of the brand though. When we do our events, we actually do like sponsorships, we do seminars and things like that. So you can sit down with whomever. Manuel Noah always comes to mind because I love him so much from Law Road. But you can sit down there and really, really, immerse yourself in, his base of knowledge. Now, that's not something that's going to happen every day for the consumer, So I can, sympathize with the fact that you really have to seek it out. I'm paying $30 for a cigar that Randy pays $12 for. That kind of a thing. It completely, resonates. I would suggest once again is just seeking out, the podcast and talking to people. Just talk to people. Talk to your brother at the lounge. Now, hey man, I'm thinking of buying this. Have you tried that? And that's the way I used to do it because, we all have had, ebb and flow with our with our levels of income. If I'm going to spend $10 on a cigar, I want to know. I can't really honestly speak to in terms of the cultural difference, in terms of the perspective on seeking knowledge. I know that in the Latin countries, it's just so cultural that people are they're always talking cigars, always talking cigars. So you're just getting the information almost in a, just because it's there in the ether, and because it's so prevalent. But in terms of the UK, parts of Europe, I can't really speak to it culturally, very well. That's why I have writers. They tell me stuff. So I'm glad you told me stuff.
That's great. Thanks so much for that. It's great. Great
Sure,
having you. Yeah, it's been
thank
great.
you. Oh, this is my beater hat. I'm not even wearing a good one. So, but thank you.
I do have actually one very quick question. So just going back to PR, it's a dinosaur in marketing and brand exposure. So company's been doing that for probably over 100 years now. And Ogilvy was always saying that famous father of marketing. He was always saying that PR is just to cut through what we have to select. That's it. So it means that if I send, 50 PR releases to 50 publishers, 5 may accept.
Right.
So it's basically the numbers game. So his idea was that forget that BS. Go for and not advertorials. Just go for advertorial. Pay a little bit extra money, but you're gonna get a story told. And if you can't, your story is shit. Sometimes the publisher will tell that story better in a way that will resonate with the readers. And so my question would be about that. Like, is that true? Is that actually what he said probably 50 years ago is actually still very relevant? Like PR is not that powerful. Forget it. Rather concentrate on specific channels and then try to get that advertorial, not editorial, advertorial.
Sure. Yeah, thank you. I think that it's a matter of even just from our perspective, what we do, how we try to connect out there. I think it's a matter of finding the platform that works best for you, and then that's your primary target, and then keeping your your feet in the waters, keep your toe a little bit in the waters of the other ones, because you don't want just because, for example, we use a specific platform that doesn't work, you're still going to put stuff on there, still going to put it out there. But I think, we're just inundated with so much information anyway. And I think a lot of the traditional brands do it the traditional way, which is fine because you're always going to know that brand. You're always going to have that brand right there in your file when you go into a lounge, or you're searching around for new releases, going to on Half Wheel, which is wonderful, resource. I love them. And I think that it's out there for you if you want it. I think as influencers, as people who are disseminating information, you just have to do what works for you. And my feeling is always there's room for us all. As long as if we're getting you guys the information that you want. In our case, we're doing it in an entertaining way. That's just because that's how we enjoy doing it. So you kind of have to please yourself first, and then hopefully that resonates with the, with the audience. And I think all the information is out there, and I do think that some brands really hit their. Obviously, I can't say, who does what well and who doesn't, but I just think that there's some brands that do it really well, and I think there's some brands that do themselves a disservice because they're somehow just not connecting. And it's not even a matter of resources. Anybody can shoot out a press release. Of course they can. Who can't? What company? Well, I would imagine that any company should be able to shoot out a press release. But are you really getting to the people? Are you really giving them information that they want? We've had that experience too. We'll put something out there and that didn't really go anywhere. Oh well, I guess it just didn't resonate. For
well, in a nutshell, PR doesn't work that well, because I between the lines, I get that sense. But I have a follow-up question. It's actually related to your presence on social media. So when you have so many social channels, right? And obviously you can reuse the same, resalvage the same content, and I want to say spam, but release on different channels. That don't you think that social media for a lot of magazines became dumping ground of content? So imagine that same press release, they wouldn't publish it, but on social media, it's an organic piece, well, there's no harm, we just dump it here, and on social media channel. So what's your take on that? Social media becoming actually a dumping ground, and people subscribing to hundreds of channels, and then after a month, stopping following those channels, and then after a month, coming back, just because just overload. So what's your take on that dumping ground, association of social media?
Yeah, I kind of think, for brands, it's the easy way out, and it's just like, okay, regurgitate this press release, this celebrity who's making a Negroni, which is fine, but you've probably seen it a few times, already. And, look, I'm in the media, we're guilty of those types of things too. I mean, I'll go through our wall and I go, why did you guys post another photo of whomever? Why did we do that? Oh, well, it got so many such and such likes the last time. And, we wanted to do a throwback Thursday and all of that. I said, but we have so much other stuff. We don't have to do that. And, I mean, for us, our only pitfall is that it's the celebrity connection, because we know, people love reading about the celebrities who enjoy cigars and spirits, and it's sexy to know that, Rod Stewart loves Scotch, and he enjoys the same type of experience with his Scotch that I do. But in terms of the content, I mean, that's why we're able to click off. You don't like it, just move on. Just keep scrolling. But I think it does lack creativity. And we try, and again, we need to get better at it too. And I don't care who you are, which magazine, whatever media outlet you are, you got to cop to it. And you got to say, yeah, I don't really like what we're doing in that area. I think we need to, it's a process of refinement, because I want you guys to be getting a little bit of knowledge, getting some entertainment out of this, just stay away from the interviews that I do with people, because those are the most boring, ones that are out there, just so you know that. So, but yeah, and then also um, again, lack of creativity, that's out there. We're so dependent, on clickbait, I'm sure everyone here, maybe in your, pertinent industries, I mean, you're seeing that too. It's like, oh gosh, do we have to put this out there? But yeah, I got to get a click.
Yeah,
It's
well,
elevating. I think it's elevating the
creativity is a good
standards.
point.
Yeah, I think
Creativity,
I
I'm
think it's
with
about
you on that.
elevating standards, and that is something that we have lost. We have lost that, because when you had a magazine and the newspaper and all of that, and you were getting your information, you were reading Time Magazine, Newsweek, whatever. And it's like, yeah, just the experience of it, the information, it's different from yesterday's information. Now, the news cycle, we're guilty of that. I'm guilty. I used to love reading the New York Times. I used to have it delivered to my home, even though I live in Southern California. I'm from New York City. Every Sunday, had to read that Times. And I'll cop to it. Now I read it on the app, So, we're all guilty of that. And sometimes I think it was William Somerset Maugham who said, if it's new, it ain't necessarily good. And if it's good, it ain't necessarily new. So I think we all need to start looking back at maybe some of the traditional things that we've, lost, and even in terms of how it pertains, to cigars. I see a lot of younger people like, oh, I want to try that $70 cigar. Oh, I saw this on TikTok, and it's like, well, maybe go talk to your dad, maybe your dad's cigar is the best cigar,
Oh, very
Oh,
true.
absolutely. Very true.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Really
Thank
great
you.
answer.
Yeah, man.
Joey had a comment or a question for you as well.
Yeah, I was wondering because we're kind of in, as you mentioned, with the creative deficit. It's very copy and paste because you go on Instagram or YouTube and everyone's kind of doing the same thing and they're all following the same guests and telling the same stories. How do you think we could break up that like creative deficit that you were talking about and make it interesting again and kind of bring
Right.
that creativity back in? How would you do it?
Right. Well, first of all, I love everything you have back there from the guitar, all those tchotchkes. So good for you, man. I love
Thank you.
tchotchkes too. Yeah, absolutely. I have a memorabilia collection and this and that and the other thing. You know what? Use your voice. Contact the publisher. We are much, whomever, much more accessible. Agents of celebrities. All the information is out there. Contact us. Let us know what you'd like more of. Use your comments nicely, graciously, because we can all kind of have, we're all sensitive. I've had some things thrown my way too. But, just try to give a little feedback. We don't know. We go out and we explore, we do our market research, and we have our analytics and this and that, and who's looking for that, and, but let us know. I would suggest that.
Okay, thank you.
So what's the old thing there, right? If you tell me what you want, I might be able to give it to you.
Yeah.
And that's why going, like when we do our tasting events, it is, well, to put them on is it's just the most horrible experience. But that's behind the scenes. But when we do our tasting events and getting that feedback from our customers, people who subscribe to our magazine, people come to our events, the people who, like us, hopefully on social media, just talking to people, I've had people, say things to me, and I'm like, okay, good, thank you.
Last just remark, not really a question. So you're already onto something. So large companies, they're doing focus groups to this day and spend insane amount of money. But
Right.
small companies don't do that. and then they lose that opportunity because
Mhm.
everybody relies on, digital analytics, like, oh, we have all this data. That data, modeled in most cases. It's not, actual, numbers that you can relate. And it's not like a questionnaire that those people, filled in. So focus groups, cost a lot of money, but still the best, and all this, before internet, was working really well. And it works really well, to this day, but just, cost a lot of money.
Right. I mean, for all of us, who have, jobs and careers and this and that, we all know that a lot of those analytics can be spun, they can be manipulated, it just depends on how you kind of frame things. And whereas if we talk to one another, I suppose that there's, certain things are subject to interpretation and we all have our kind of filter, but, talk to me, you know, give me a little feedback, even if you're saying, hey man, what did you do? Why did you feature, that person in the magazine? They have I don't know, they had a kid driving, I don't know, whatever, but that kind of thing. I want to know, why'd you feature that brand? Their spirit is subpar, and I've spoken to my friends, and we thought it was swill. Let me know. And I think that's something we try to stay away from. But what's better than talking and having a conversation like we're doing now?
And one other point that I think is somewhat overlooked in today's media landscape is that we don't always have to agree on certain things, but at least we need to provide a platform where we can have a discussion and then agree to disagree, but with people respectfully coming together, sharing their thoughts and opinions. And then, it's not always about trying to convince the other side necessarily, but at least having that open debate. And
Mm-hmm.
social
Mm-hmm.
media more and more seems to be going away from that. And people seem more opinionated than ever. And I mean, look at the perceived general public and general discussions out there, where it's all opinion, right? And more to the extreme.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, regardless, we're all here. We probably all have many different interpretations of many different things, related to religion and society and politics. And there's a healthy discourse, right? And we don't want to go there. And there's also the type of discourse that is, harmful. So, you know what? I used my home lounge in Orange, California. I used to go to this place a lot. It became my home lounge. And we had a rule: no politics, no religion, and no bashing your spouse. That was it. It's like, we're here as my spouse just went through the door. So I had to say that just for her ears. But but no, I mean, there's other things, to talk about that are, fun. Let's talk about music. Let's talk about books. Let's talk about this, that. We don't have to go to these places that, lead us down, to a dark path. Or if you're going to talk about that stuff, then well, let's just be reasonable about it. Let's not like argue and lose friendships or have family members like dissolve and crazy stuff like that. I mean, I don't know. We've had that experience in our own families, and it's just so disheartening. So I would imagine, like you said, it's just global. It's just the social media, the internet, and it kind of fosters that. We all know that. So it's kind of, you have to pick and choose your spots, right? But
Randy,
I'm so fortunate that what we do, because I have a policy, we don't talk about politics in our magazine. So there's no reason to do it. There's no reason. Or we'll do a little spirituality thing every now and again, how it might relate to a travel experience, but we pretty much stay clear of the stuff that we say that, who said that there was some talking because the better minds than us, like,
Randy, you've been extremely generous and gracious with your time with us, and I'm very, very grateful for that. before we let you go,
Yeah.
you obviously shared with us sort of your bucket list moment with Francis Ford Coppola, and the other interview you still have on the bucket list besides that grand piece of writing you'll hopefully share with us at some point in the near future. Um, One final question: what is one of or the question that you would wish to have asked more often when you conducted interviews, but you probably
That's a
have missed?
that's a great question. That's a great question, and um, it's an interesting thing. I've always loved. Oh gosh, and I can't remember it now. Do you got anyone familiar with like Inside the Actors Studio? James Lipton. He used to do that questionnaire at the end of Bernard Pivot. It's based on the Bernard Pivot questionnaire. And I, even when I go into an interview, I always try to like pull something out of there. And the question that I should ask more often than not, because it's very telling, is past, present, future. Who would you like to sit down and have a cigar and a drink with? Tell me that. I have asked that question, but I forget to do it a lot. And it just, it opens up so many other conversations. You know, some people always say Winston Churchill or whatever, you know, that kind of a thing. But it's it's very representative of something. I mean, I know who mine would be, you know, but
Would you like to share it with us?
yeah, and I'd love for you guys to share with me too. So I would, you know, say independently of any family members we've lost. So if we're looking at the past, for me, it would be John Lennon. It's a no-brainer. You know, one of the greatest musical artists. You know, I'm a Beatles freak. You know, what can I say? So if anyone else, I'd love to have smokes and cigar and spirits with John Lennon.
Very cool. Very interesting.
What's yours? Who's your person?
Well, I actually thought about that long and hard, and
Yeah,
it's a tricky one for me. I think Abraham Lincoln would be great.
yeah.
Just because I always loved American history, and I wrote my final thesis in high school about the American dream and
Mhm.
where it came from historically and spiritually.
Sure.
So yeah, that to me would be definitely one for the bucket list.
Mhm.
Sounds a bit cliche, but
No, 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 no,
love that.
no. It resonates. Yeah, sure.
Dejan,
Who
what's
else?
yours?
Who
Would
else? Somebody
your
give me a
hand up?
name.
I just wanted to chip in on this because it's interesting, really, this question. So thank you, first of all, thank you for the very nice interview. But this question that you mentioned now, it's really because we have another Zoom lounge on Tuesdays where this question is obligatory question. Like
Okay. Okay.
this is the question, and they always say, you know, the guys who are asking it, they always say they stole this question, they took it from Jose Blanco, and you can name 3 people dead or alive which with whom you would like to smoke a cigar. And it's like it's been on for years, you know. That's
That's
why it's
cool.
like,
That's cool.
and that's it does exactly what you said, you know. It
Yeah.
brings up so many discussions.
Right.
That's
Right.
yeah.
Right. Well, great minds think alike, so I'm sure we're all in agreement. You know. Cool.
Randy, I can, as I said, only thank you wholeheartedly for your time that you so generously shared with us, and thank you for the wonderful conversation.
Mhm.
You've given me a lot to think about,
It's
and I
very
learned a
sweet of
lot
you.
during the last 2 hours. I really appreciate it, and I hope that at some point soon we'll sit down in person and share a good drink and a cigar together.
Absolutely. Thank you. I can't tell you how I appreciate, you know, the extension of the offer and, you know, for whatever little bit that I might have, you know, to kind of share it. And, you know, please, everyone who's on this call, please send me an email at randy at cigar and spirits, right? And I'll make sure we get a copy of the magazine in your hand if you don't subscribe already. So, and if you do subscribe, thank you.
That's very, very kind.
So it's Randy at Cigar and Spirits.
.com.
Thank you.
We'll put it in the comment, and we'll put it on YouTube as well. But
Cool, man.
Randy, thank you so much again. What a privilege and pleasure. Thanks for
Hey,
joining
thank
us at the
you.
Light 'em Up
You guys are
Lounge.
wonderful. Thank you.
And, we wish you all the very best and continued success. We'll see
You
you
as
all
well.
next week. Until then, light 'em up. Goodbye, everybody.
Thank you, Randy. Great
Thank
show,
you.
Reinhardt.
Appreciate it.
Great show, Reinhard. Thanks, Randy.
Thank you.
Great show. Top notch.